So last year, 8 murder cases were filed in LaPorte County, and that's solved murders that the law enforcement agency presents for charges. That's not including unsolved murder cases where there's a shooting, and unfortunately, we've seen a number of them. In 2020, it was a little higher. There were 10. And unfortunately, that puts us on a par with Chicago per capita. We're actually a little bit higher when you adjust for population.
Wow.
So sobering statistic, but we're doing a lot of work to try to get the guns off the streets, which these are almost universally shooting deaths. So gun charges, that brings me to the next stat that we have. How many, want hazard a guess what we had in 2015?
Gun charge,
Gun charges in the whole county.
25.
It's not a bad guess. It was actually 41 in
Oh.
2015. And last year, 178.
Wow.
178. So what's happening is mostly young men are getting guns from people who have no criminal record. They're buying guns, some of them in bulk. We have people who bought as many as 20 in a year, and then they transfer them to other people who don't have a clean record, who can't legally buy a gun. So this is a problem in our communities, and law enforcement's working on it, and we're filing every case we get so that we can try to deter these and reduce the numbers of people who can actively obtain guns, but it's an ongoing problem. All right, go back to the back table again. How many current pending cases are in the office total? You are right up, Justin.
200?
Anyone?
Yeah.
Oh, it's way higher.
1,500?
It's actually over 16,000.
Oh, wow.
What?
Yeah, that includes active search warrants. Those are any cases filed before any court in the county. So.
Just felonies?
No, it's everything. It's all the misdemeanors, all search warrants, anything from a C misdemeanor on up to murder. So that's everything.
You can ask a question to people.
Okay, all right. Oh, the people on Zoom, we'll ask you, Becky and Dr. Ross back there. How many cases were filed last year? We have 16,000 pending. How many of those were just filed last year?
10,000.
It's cases do pend for a couple of years sometimes, unfortunately. So it's actually 4,392
Wow.
last year, and that was an uptick from 2020 because with the pandemic we did have a little lower numbers in crime, unfortunately. But as you can see, it's a steady amount of work, and I hope you enjoyed the quiz and learned something about what we do. And I'm happy to introduce our speaker. Oh, sorry, forgot about that. Yeah.
We should do a good in order too.
Oh, yeah, I thought I asked, but we'll do it again. Anybody have anything additional for good?
Well, yeah, just pick them out and make them do it. So, Jim Scott, you got anything you want to talk about?
Betsy.
I have something.
All right.
So, I was recently going through my mother's old piano music, and I'm sorry. No. Okay. So I was recently going through my mother's old piano music, and I found this book called Songs for the Rotary Club. And I thought I would bring it because it's pretty interesting book. There are some obviously Rotary was an all-male organization, so there's a lot of songs about the Rotary boys and those kinds of things. And the reasons why we should say no is I'll pass it around. The copyright on this. Here's the most recent. It's 1940, and original copyright 1925. So there are some very racist things in here as well. So, but just thought y'all would enjoy it.
History for better or worse, right? And I'm gonna let you pick, since you're a guest today, just one of those out of it's not me.
All right, I don't have my glasses, but I think it's,
It's like 6:35.
Right here.
All right. Jim?
you're welcome, Jim.
Okay.
You wanna
Put
share
down the
it?
microphone for a second.
Donate your half.
So it looks like a fresh brand new just as well as for space. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Pass that around. Anybody else? Anything else for the good of the order?
I guess we're good.
That's what that. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm gonna, oh, Jessica.
I don't know if my guests.
Oh, yeah,
And about our speaker.
do that.
As a person who loves writing and reading. and-
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. All right, anybody else? I'm gonna put in $1 for our guest, $1 for the speaker, and $1 for, John's going down and file in Indianapolis tomorrow, so that we can continue doing the work we do. And, I'm celebrating that with another $1. All right.
I'll get a couple of dollars for our speaker and our guest and. for
Speaker
not
and guest.
being Here last week because we had all this snow.
All right.
I was giving Jim a hard time.
Yeah, you were.
Everybody just stayed home and played it anyway.
All right, anyone else? Okay, so happy to introduce Sandra Young. She's a local author. She was a Rotary member for years. When I was starting back in 2012, she was a member when she worked at Unity Foundation. And we are proud to have her present to talk about her book that's coming out this year. Welcome.
Do you need me to use the mic? Can you hear? Do you hear now? Yes, can you hear me? I don't think the mic is.
Yeah, we
working.
can hear you now.
Okay, let's try it this way then. Don't you?
Yeah, I switched the mic over to the camera, so.
Ah, okay, great, great. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here again. As Mary said, I worked for Unity Foundation for 5 years. I was the vice president with Maggie. And so when she couldn't come to Rotary, at times I was fortunate enough to get to come. And then I retired 4 years ago. And I said, I want to write. As Jessica said, I have a passion for writing. I started out as a journalist to a newspaper. And I said, I'm going to dedicate myself to writing. So I'm really pleased to come today and share with you that on February 21st, my debut novel, Divine Vintage, will be published. It's with a small traditional press called Wild Rose Press. And I think it's hopefully of special interest here because I studied in Michigan City. Now they say, write what you know, which was part of it. But I started writing this book, and you can see the cover here, Divine Vintage. It does have a vintage clothing hook to it. And, you know, I really had this love and a large collection of vintage clothing. And so I wrote the book partly to, you know, kind of tie into that. But then I've also recognized it's also gratitude to LaPorte County that helped to drive the book because, you know, I've lived here for more than 2 decades and I really felt very welcome. And that was not only because I did theater where I got introduced to vintage clothing. I did it throughout the region. I've done more than 75 different shows, but also when I worked for Unity Foundation and then for 11 years, the executive director of Healthy Communities, I was able to work with so many great individuals and organizations, you know, like yourselves, school systems, et cetera, to benefit the quality of life. And, you know, that was a wonderful thing. And then there's the Uptown Artist District, and I'm really inspired by what Michigan City is doing with the support of the arts. So my book is semi-fictionalized. You don't recognize everything, but I do call it Franklin Street. I do talk about the Uptown Artist District. I even describe some sculptures. Now, other things you'll look at and go, oh, I do know that. But the people are all made up except for one person. And I'm not going to tell you who it is because maybe then you'll want to read the book. There's one person that I just use a first name. It's a distinctive name. And that person's mentioned. But otherwise, but there was a male author who wrote kind of a Vinci Code action thriller. He read it and he really liked it too. So, it's not just all for women. But at the same time, if it's not your cup of tea, maybe you have family member, coworkers, friends, somebody would say, hey, I'd love to read something based in Michigan City and that has these kind of elements. Because Divine Vintage, give it just a quick synopsis, is about a woman who owns a vintage clothing store. She's moved to Michigan City, she opens it on Franklin Street, and she has a particular sensibility with the vintage clothing. If it's a special piece, she can see an image of, the person who wore it, feel their emotion, have sensory perception of smell and hear music or whatever. And she goes to model an Edwardian trousseau gown, like this one on the cover, and she has a vision back to the past in 1913 of a murder scene. But when she comes out of this, she tells it differently than local history tells it. So she has to convince the handsome descendant of the accused husband that he should join her. And sure enough, they can see into the past using the vintage clothing. They have the woman's diary, and they're trying to determine who really committed this mystery. The murder, the crime of passion. Was it the husband, or was it these other suspects who come up? So it's got all of these little plot threads running through. I call it dual timeline romances wrapped around historical mystery with a ghostly psychic sizzle.
Wow. You should have made that the title of your book.
Yeah. It's a little bit long, but I have to say, that sounds kind of fluffy, but I also, because I worked a lot with issues to better people's lives through unity and healthy communities, have this social justice leaning. And so as I reworked the book to make it better, I added in a character who was homeless because I chaired the home team for several years under Unity. And, that as an author, we have an opportunity to shine a spotlight and to educate people positively about issues. I took that as a privilege. And so I have a homeless character. And the plot arc, is the person's important to it. And actually, I know many of you know Kristen Noonan. She read the book as a sensitivity reader, even though I had worked as the head of the home team. I wasn't in the trenches working with the homeless. She and others were. And I wanted to make sure I was being totally PC in what I was portraying. And so she read it and she loved it. So I'm very happy about that. The first draft, I actually started writing this in 2010. And that's before Julia Nielsen opened the closet downtown. It is not based on the closet or her, but I have sold some of my stuff to her through the years for a good deal. So I wrote 3 linked short novels, and I went to a workshop. There is Catherine Lanigan, some of you may know. She is an international best-selling author who moved back to LaPorte a few years ago. And she's written more than 45 novels. She's had a Hallmark movie, one of her books. And so she did the workshop and she looked at some of my work and she said, write that one into a book. So I expanded it out, and then I tried to get an agent because that's often what you do in publishing. And you query it out to them, you send them a letter, you hope will grab their attention. And, I had some nibbles. I had somebody read the full book and get good feedback, but ultimately I didn't land an agent. So I was kind of like, push it aside, write some other books. I worked on some other things that were more women's fiction, and didn't have the psychic angle and all of that. And but I'd come back to Divine Vintage because I was also learning. I go down to Ball State. I attended a couple of their writers webinar or writers workshops where they have conference speakers teaching you. I was on online webinars with Writers Digest and with the Women's Fiction Writers Association. And it's an international one I'm a member of. So I was learning how to improve this book, how to add more stakes and tension, so that you really wanted to read through. And that's where I added the homeless plot line and more suspects because it didn't start out as a mystery. They knew who did it at the beginning, and it was like, this needs to be a mystery. And so it sets it up. There are other suspects because everybody likes a little mystery, don't they? So then I decided on a lark, November 2020, I pitched it on a Twitter. It's called Pitch Wars. And I got a contract offer from a small traditional press. And I'm like, well, that's great, but they're kind of newish. Let me try another contest. And I got another offer. So I thought, well, I'm gonna check out another one that some of the other women's fiction writers I respect her with. And in April of last year, I signed with the Wild Rose Press. They have more than 3,000 books out there, and few 300 authors or more. And as a traditional press, that means I don't pay for the book to be done. They take care of the editing and the cover and all the printing process. They get it out, and it's in bookstores right now. It's already up for pre-sale. It's on Barnes and Noble. 25% off Barnes and Noble pre-sales through tomorrow. And it's on.
Well, sorry, it's finer.
It's also, of course, on Amazon. It's on already on iBooks and bookshop.org and other places. And it will be paperback and also ebooks, but not hardback because it is a small press. And these days, even the big 5 publishers, they put more money into marketing because they have it, but all authors have to market. You have to be out there, you have to be pushing, you have to be marketing. And, I will be getting some royalties, probably not much. I've never expected to make money off of this. I do it as a labor of love, and that is all there is to it. But I really had to put myself in a new position then of branding myself, branding, promoting. And some of you who knew me probably say, oh, she did promotion. She was doing PR all the time. She was in articles. She was on stage promoting, those things. That was different. That was my organizations and the causes, and it was the theater and the things I was doing. It wasn't really so much me. Now it's me. I'm throwing myself wide open. Here's my story, pour it out for people to review it, and some people will like it and some won't. So I had to create a brand, and the first thing I decided to do was do a website. And so I connected with Sarah Group. It's a small design firm out of LaPorte. And so these young guys helped me whip my site into I think we might get a picture of it up here. Jim can pull it up. SandraYoungAuthor.com. It's got a lot of vintage clothing hook. It's got the novel there, and then it's got some vintage clothing, because my hook is the vintage clothing and my singing and acting, that creative side. But I also found I need to go into a bigger pond. I really wasn't even active on Facebook much. I started getting more active there, and it was great to connect with old friends and acquaintances and people now saying, I'm buying your book, it's not your book. And it's just like, oh, warms my heart. But I knew I needed to go bigger, because think about the competition, thousands of books each year. If you're on Kindle Unlimited, all these free books, people are self-publishing like crazy, and that didn't used to happen. So you're competing against big publishers. So I jumped into some more social media pond. I went on Instagram. I was like, oh, never thought I'd do that. But I really like that. You put up your pictures and your verbiage, and I like Instagram. Twitter, I've never been super fond of it. I do it a little bit, not too fond of it. And TikTok, I just did a video that another young author's going to post in her feed. It's really not something I'm comfortable with at this point. But all of those things put me on a more international aspect. I'm connecting with people, especially on Instagram. You may not know, but there is a huge community who loves books. It's called Bookstagram. And there are thousands of these people. And they post about books, and they review books, and they recommend them. And they just, that's all, they talk about them all the time. Goodreads has millions of people on there too. And they just, it's all talking about books. Well, I never knew that. If I'd have been smart, I'd have been connected there years ago. But I'm just like, ooh, I'm running fast to catch up. I did, I'm not putting a lot of budget into marketing, but I am doing a couple of what they call book tours. And so I'm working with a couple of companies, and they will put my book out there, and some people will review it from their stable. One of them has 700 Bookstagrammers, and then they'll review it, put it out. It'll reach their thousands of followers, getting me way past what I have. And I've also connected with groups of other authors debuting this year. We're called the 2022 debuts. And there are almost 400 of them in one group. We're on Slack together, the platform. And these folks write everything from middle grade to young adult to adult fiction. Then another group of us is on Facebook, and we all write adult-oriented fiction. And it's been great because there's a support group. Locally, there's people who write, but nobody I knew was going through this specific journey at this point of getting this book out here. And you kind of feel like, I'm all by myself here. So I've been able to really connect and learn so much from them. All the stuff that I'm doing I'm learning from other people. Like I said, running as fast as I can, but it's been really fun to do. As for my vintage collection, you could say I have a huge collection. When it's all together, it fills a small bedroom. And over the years, I have sold off some of it. And I actually have never spent a whole lot on it though, because I used to get huge bargains. I'd go to Goodwill and Salvation Army, and I could pick up some really great vintage stuff if I recognize. I'd go to an auction and get a box lot for $1 of clothing. Nobody wanted it. Now they do. Now they don't even put that stuff out in Goodwill and Salvation Army. They know what it is. They sell it for more. And you go to an auction, it's gonna be sky high. On Instagram, vintage sellers will sell things for prices that make you go, wow, just basic old, like this vintage, this kind of thing. They probably have that on there for 65, 70, bucks or something. I mean, it's really like, so when I get ready to part with my old friends, my vintage clothing, I will be on Instagram. I'll be selling it there. In my collection, some of those pieces are in the book. They've inspired it. So like I have a dress that's like grass green, bright green brocade dress that ends up being in the style show scene, where they're celebrating a centennial, by the way. It's dual timelines, 1913 for the murder, and then actually 1913 and 2013. Which may sound odd, but I didn't want to put the 1913 people going into World War I or going into the first pandemic. So that's what's happened there. But my clothing, that I mentioned spans, and I don't go into great detail where you go, oh, it's so boring, but it's like a frill, a lace ruffle, to kind of give it that flavor of fashion. Nowadays, I don't buy a lot of clothing. A lot of people gift me things. They know I collect, that I cherish it, and they'll say, "Would you take this family piece for me?" And if anybody has anything or knows anybody who does and wants to pass it on, I am happy to be a caretaker. I use it in presentations. I've done several. I was Barker Mansion Tees speaker one summer, and I bring pieces from my collection, and I talk about fashion from the Civil War to like the 80s, because that is vintage now. The 90s is vintage. It's considered 20 years plus, 20, 25 years in clothing. Hold on to your stuff. Really, it's pretty crazy. But yeah, I use it, and it's that history of fashion. I'm pretty fascinated about it. It's a historical reference of who we were at the time, how we lived, what we did, and how society evolves. I consider vintage clothing an art form. So that's really what helped to drive my writing. And I could do these in person. I could do them Zoom. Book clubs would be great. If you know people who are into book clubs who have one, I'd love to do those. A friend of mine has me going into one in Newport in April. I could do those Zoom too, and some authors are, because the pandemic the last couple of years has put a real kibosh on live. I do plan to do some live book signings. I think things are going to get better, and I'm going to do some live book signings. Talking to Unique Boutique out of LaPorte. I think Lubeznik, I've had friends already talked to them, and I'm sure that Janet will be cool with that. So there'll be some places where I go and I sign and meet friends, and that's going to be wonderful. So overall, I guess my hope as a newbie writer is to continue, loving it, writing. I have kind of a sequel book of one of the characters, and it needs to be totally redone. I thought a whole new, kind of plot twist for that one. And it's set at LaPorte Little Theater. So that's going to be, again, here in the county. Still have a ghostly angle, though, and romance. Sorry, those are things I enjoy in a book. So I really want to keep connecting too. It's so much fun connecting not only with my circle, my friends and acquaintances from way back, but also with people around the world. I can now say I actually have author friends in Paris, in Rome, in Australia. One I met in California when I was out there in December. I mean, they're all over the place. And sometimes I don't even know they're in a different country until somebody comes up and says, "Oh, they're in England." It's just been a cool, crazy experience. And I'm counting down to this big debut. And then the marketing just has to continue. It's just it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And you're really my first speaking on it. So I appreciate, Jessica, the opportunity. And if anybody has any questions, if anybody has any questions about the book or clothing or anything, yes.
I actually did have two things. One was a question. You mentioned social media and trying to hook up there, and you also mentioned the sequel. thought about Patreon or a similar platform to that for the sequel?
Not at this point, because I don't have the knowledge of it. It doesn't mean that I couldn't look into it and make a decision to go a different direction.
It's interesting because what it does is it provides fans access to the author, but they pledge a certain amount each month to get access as you're writing to the chapters. So it's sort of a way of actually funding your writing.
That's a great idea. If you can get them to like your first book and then they can do it. I really would love to have people go on my website, sign up, and very occasional details and newsletters. And you have another question or comment?
The other question was actually, I'm wearing Levi's that are actually out of, they don't make the 560s anymore. I have 2 pairs of the 560s. Am I sitting on vintage clothing?
To be honest, don't get rid of those. Vintage Levi's can be very valuable.
I know I have never been able to find these. I can't remember when they stopped making them, but I actually have 560s, which is a loose fit.
There you go. I have a whole pair of Levi's too, and I was looking at them, I'm like, boy. I do that. I look up labels on my stuff and try, to try to determine, it's hard to date finished clothing. I have a pretty good, because I researched it a lot too, so I have a pretty good feel for it, but nobody's perfect unless you know the provenance exactly. And some of them I do. Somebody says that was my mom's, dress. This was this, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, all your vintage Levi's.
My uncle used to work for Levi, so.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Anyone else have any questions or comments? We wish you luck. I hope it's successful. Thank you so much. Appreciate that time. Yes, that's it.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. Thanks everybody for being online as well. And I guess that is the end of the meeting, so we will see you in about a week.